Hello, my name is John Westbrooks. I'm a sports scientist with Pro, primarily focused with the Pro 2 group. I'm sorry I'm unable to join you virtually today, but unfortunately I'm traveling. Leland said he would get any questions you had to me, and then I will either film a video or answer them in a written format. But we're going to talk about fitness and nutrition today in a kind of global overview sense. So the first thing I want to touch on are the physical demands of a referee during the match. Down at the bottom, you can see a heart rate trace of an official during the match. In this one, it looks like the first half was a little bit harder than the second half. Um, and you can see that in the first half, they hit zone 5 quite a bit, which is greater than 90% of your max heart rate, and then spent a good chunk of time in both zones 3 and 4. So you can see there's quite a bit of work being done by this official during the match. And the heart rate profile can change a fair bit depending on the temperature during the match. So if you're in Florida versus Portland, it can be quite a bit different, as well as if you're at altitude, or sometimes the intensity of the match plays quite a dramatic effect on heart rate as well. So if you have two teams that are really kind of countering quite a bit, we're playing a lot of long balls over the top, things like that, you can get quite a bit of heart rate increase there with the intensity going back and forth. Um, the other thing we look at quite a bit are the physical outputs during the match. So total distance, high speed running, high intensity running, sprint distance. And so we'll see around just under 10,000 meters run during a match. And a lot of that is done at pretty low intensity, but you'll have almost 1,600 meters on average done in that high intensity running session, which, um, if you look at what the intervals are run for the Category 1 fitness test, they're run at 5 meters per second. High intensity running category during the match is 4.1 to 5.5, so that kind of encompasses that referee fitness test level there, just to give you an idea of what those speeds are. And then the high speed running is 5.5 to 6.9. If you look at what the speed needed to pass the men's sprint time, so 40 meters in under 6 seconds, you have to run 6.6 meters per second. And that is um, encompassed within that high speed running section. And then sprinting is greater than that at 6.9. And we typically don't want to see people sprinting during a match unless the players' activities really demand it. So one of the things we do is we look at how the officials are moving relative to the players. So if the players' high intensity running is higher, is the referee's high intensity running matching that, or is the high intensity running of the referee going above or well below the players? So it's just kind of something we use to gauge the how well the official is physically um, cap- uh, handling the match. So for our training principles, we tend to primarily focus on sprinting, interval work, and strength work. So the sprinting focus is really important because for a couple of purposes. One, we want the officials to have the capacity to sprint at a high speed when they need to. We don't necessarily want them to do it at all times if the game doesn't demand it, but we want them to have the ability to do it if the game asks for it. Additionally, it's really important to maintain the ability to sprint as an official ages, and partially because the age gap between the players and the referees is quite big, and so the referees really need to work to maintain their sprinting ability as they age. And then um, we focus our interval work using maximal aerobic speed sessions, which are basically targeted intervals um, for each person, targeted by calculating the basically the fastest they can run while using primarily their aerobic or oxygen-based energy system, and it's calculated by running a 2,000 meter time trial, and then taking the time it takes you to complete that, 2,000 meters divided by that time, and that will give you your MAS, which we'll get more into on the next slide. And then we do focus quite a bit on strength work as well. So, some example maximal aerobic speed sessions using that 4.44 meters per second from the previous slide. So the one we're using the most right now is the Eurofit at this point in the season. And the way you calculate the work that you're going to do during one of these sessions is if you look down in the third to the right there, you have Eurofit 110%. So what you're going to do is you're going to multiply 4.44 by basically 1.1, and that will give you basically the velocity that you're working at, or the pace you're working at, and then you multiply that by your duration, which in this case is 20 seconds. That gives us a work distance of 98 meters. So you're trying to run 98 meters in 20 seconds, then you will stand and recover for 20 seconds, and you'll perform that for anywhere from 6 to 10 reps, and then you'll do a couple minutes of standing recovery. You'll do anywhere from 2 to 6 sets of that. And this one's nice because it mimics the fitness test. When we're in fitness test prep period, we can prepare for the test, but we can do it in a little bit more targeted manner, as well as it doesn't have quite as much strain as the grid session. Another session we're using quite a bit right now is the long interval, where you work at a little bit under your MAS, but you're going for anywhere from 60 seconds to 3 minutes, and then you're doing moving recovery at about half of your MAS. We typically do about 2 minutes on the 3-minute session, so we do a little bit less recovery than the duration of work that you're doing. And on the longer end, so when you're doing 3 minutes, we'll typically top out at around 10 reps overall, just because after that it does add up quite quickly on how much work you're doing. If you're doing 60 seconds, you can get away with doing a little bit, having a few more reps in there, and you can increase the pace a bit. So we'll usually see around 105% is where you want to hit for those 60-second reps. The grids is similar to the Eurofit, but instead of standing recovery, you're doing jogging recovery at half of your MAS. So you end up creating a rectangle. And then over on the far right, you have the Tabata session, which is a really fun one where you take the work distance, divide it by 2, and it's an out and back. So you run, in this case, it would be 53 meters out, 53 meters back in 20 seconds, stand and recover for 10 seconds, and you'll repeat that for the sets and reps. And this is a really nice one to really ramp up the heart rate and get a good hard training session in. The change of direction adds quite a bit to this session. On this slide here, I wanted to show you why we like the MAS session so much. So this is one referee doing the same MAS session 3 weeks in a row. And you can see the progression of how their body's adapting to this session over time. So on the first one, they hit 98% of their max heart rate, and the lowest of the 3 volumes of running, of distance covered, so that they covered 3,141 meters during this session. And then in session 2, they hit 96% and covered a little bit more distance. And then down in session 3, they hit 94% and covered even more distance. And the biggest thing I want you to see is if you look at the in week 1 and week 3, the first rep. So in week 1, they're already touching into zone 5 on that first rep. Then if you look down in session 3, they're not getting anywhere near zone 5 on that first first rep. So that just shows how well their body is adapting to this session. And that's why we like it so much, is because we know the amount of work we're assigning, and we can see how their body's adapting to that work, either positively or negatively, um, as they go through it. So the next few slides, I'm going to break down kind of how we look at training throughout the season. So in the preseason portion, we're focusing on building up the aerobic base. So primarily doing with non-running sessions for the early part of the preseason, and then building up to 4 to 5 running sessions throughout the week um, once we hit the later preseason portion and start having some matches and things like that. But the other thing we're really focused on is getting reacquainted with cleats. So in the off season, officials aren't wearing their cleats, and you don't want to go from not wearing cleats right back into having cleats for games. So starting with wearing them in the warm up and then building into having them for multiple training sessions. Um, it's really important that your body gets used to having cleats on again. Just helps to reduce injury and um, just better prepares your body for the match. And at this point, we're lifting 3 to 4 times a week as well. Early season, so the um, basically the start of the season into mid-season, we are still really focused on increasing aerobic capacity, switching from longer sessions to high intensity sessions, and we're doing a couple of those in a week, really trying to just ramp up the aerobic base to make sure they can sustain it throughout the rest of the year. We're getting into that match flow, so really getting back into the flow of focused recovery after the match, um, good endurance and strength session, 2 days post match, good hard sprint session, and then getting your interval sessions in, and then back into match prep. So it's just getting used to that flow that you have during the season. And then we're also um, dialing in where we're targeting weaknesses. So we'll break people into groups based on the areas they most need to improve on, whether it's sprinting or interval work or strength. We'll put people into their groups and target their training based on that. Late in the season, we are focused on reducing the volume, kind of trying to take as much load off of the legs as possible, because by the time you hit July on in the MLS season, your body's feeling it pretty good from the number of matches, the amount of travel that you've had. So taking the load off the legs volume wise, reducing the overall number of running sessions, and but increasing the intensity of the um, interval sessions and the explosive sessions, so you're not doing as much work, but you're doing really hard work during those sessions, adding more prehab type work into the strength sessions, and then also adding maybe a couple extra rest days in after matches just to help your body recover from the cumulative load throughout the season. So in off season, we are letting the officials relax. We're really pushing them to take a little bit of time off training and just let their bodies recover. And if they're doing any training, try to have it be strength, bike, rowing, swim, so that they're not pounding on the legs. They're giving their legs time to recover from all of the work it's been doing throughout the season, and pushing them to mentally relax and refresh and try and get out in nature or out with the family and reset and get ready for the next season. So switching gears a little bit, we're going to talk about nutritional advice. Um, our kind of three of our big principles are: keep it simple, everything's a spectrum, so you're not something's not good, it's not bad. Things are better or worse. And you're not trying to make the perfect decision every time. You're trying to make better decisions more often than less good decisions. So, along those lines, most of the time we're encouraging officials to pick more unprocessed foods versus processed food, um, and knowing when you can get away with having more processed foods. So after a match, you've done a lot of work, you can get away with a little bit more processed food. After a really hard training session, you can get away with a little bit more processed food. If you've had an off day, you want to go unprocessed, natural, healthy food. If you've just had a quick, easy recovery session, again, you want to make sure you're getting more towards the unprocessed side. So just knowing when you can go back and forth between processed and unprocessed, but overall you're trying to pick unprocessed foods more often. And so with behavior change and trying to make decisions, it's really important that you don't swing for the fences when you have the opportunity to get a real easy little wins um, that can create a larger change over time rather than just going for that big one and swinging and missing. So, um, an example of with an official that I've worked with, this official struggled with cooking for themselves and ate out a lot, and it was affecting not only their performance on the field but how they felt about themselves. So what we started off, and they initially wanted to um, basically go from only cooking for themselves and not eating out anymore. But what we started with instead was them cooking once a week for themselves. Then, after a few weeks of successfully cooking for themselves once, we built that up to twice and slowly progressed. And over time, saw dramatic changes in this individual's body composition and how they felt about themselves over time. And more likely than not, had they tried to go from 0 times cooking to 7 times cooking, it would have crashed and burned after a week. So the idea when you're making behavior change is take the easy wins and let the easy wins build up over time. Don't reach for the stars with every decision because you're not going to be able to sustain that and you'll just end up yo-yoing back and forth. So, quick note on portion sizing. This is from Precision Nutrition, which is a great resource. Um, Using your hand to decide your portion sizing can be really, really helpful. Um, it is travels with you everywhere. You don't have to bring a tool to understand portion sizing. You're able to do it on your own with your body. So, pre-match training and nutrition. 4 hours before or longer before a match, you can eat a nice, well-balanced meal, such as like a salad with a protein. Um, Once you get inside of 2 hours, you really want to start eating more easily digestible food, whether it's like power bars, things like that, bananas, easy fruit, small fruits. Make sure you're drinking water. You don't want to eat a big meal too close to a match because your body, in order to digest food, diverts blood flow to your stomach in order and intestines in order to digest the food. Well, when you're training or performing during a match, you need that blood flow to be going to your muscles. If your body's fighting with itself on where it's sending blood, there's two outcomes. One outcome is it's going to take away the blood flow from your stomach and it's not going to digest the food, which is going to feel very uncomfortable during the match, or it's going to divert the blood flow away from your muscles and you're not going to perform the way you need to, and that's also not going to feel very good. So making sure that you eat a meal around 4 hours out from the match to give your body time to digest is important, but it's also very important not to eat too close to the match. And then one other note is always try to make sure that anything you're changing, you change in training first before going into the match. So don't change what you eat before a match without trying it out in training so you know how your body's going to react. And try to do it before a hard training session, so like a big interval session or something like that, so you really get kind of push your body and understand how it reacts to what you're feeling. And the same goes for before a fitness test. So if you are trying to lose, say you're trying to lose some body fat and you want to go low carb, well, unfortunately, the interval test demands a lot of carbs. So make sure that you understand how you need to add them back in prior to an interval test or a match or things like that. If you're tweaking things, make sure that you can understand how it's affecting your body. Post-match training nutrition. After a match, ideally you're eating a balanced meal. You can get away with less high quality food because you have expended a lot of energy. You also want to make sure you're hydrating. It's very important, no matter what the temperature is, you are hydrating. If you're working like a youth tournament or something where you've got multiple games in a day, add a salt or an electrolyte supplement to your water, so that you are replacing those nutrients that you need in order for your body to function at an optimal level. You can do electrolyte beverages. I I find a lot of them tend to be too sugary for me, but that is a route you can go. You can also just add salt to your to your water, and that will provide a lot of the needs. And then between games, you want to have easily digestible carbs at the end of the day, and even maybe into the next day, you want to have some large meals to replenish all of the nutrients that you used during the matches. After training, explosive and strength, you want more protein, and then explosive, you also want some fat in there. And then high intensity endurance sessions, you want more carbs and electrolytes because that's what you're using a lot of during those sessions. So we're going to touch on recovery a little bit here. The biggest one is sleep. Sleep is extremely important if you want your body to recover well. And I know everybody harps on sleep, but it's really important you figure out your routine. So as to what can help you fall asleep well, for me, I make um, it's like a yogi bedtime tea. I have it almost every night before I go to bed. That kind of sets my body into the rhythm of going to sleep. I use an eye mask. I have a sound machine. I keep my room cool. I have blackout curtains. And I try to maintain a very similar bedtime each evening if I can. All of these are really important to helping me to get as much sleep as I possibly can. Um, and it's very helpful to build that routine around sleep because it helps to get your body into the rhythm of it, and your body starts to become attuned to, all right, I've had my tea, now it's time to go to sleep. Or I've foam rolled, now it's time to go to sleep. Whatever you find as your kind of trigger for when it's time to go to sleep, it helps your body dramatically. Um, Make sure you're hydrating. If you're dehydrated, your body can't recover. Make sure you're adequately refueling. If your body doesn't have the nutrients it needs to recover, it can't do it. So make sure you're giving it enough nutrients. And another big one is reducing stress. So stress really impairs the recovery process pretty dramatically. So if you're able to get into a state of feeling relaxed and um, basically de-stressing, it can really help foster an atmosphere for your body to recover really well. Whether that's going out in nature, whether it's meditation, spending time with kids, spending time with your other loved ones, things like that that help um, reduce your overall stress are really helpful to recovery. Then I have some other modalities listed on the right side that are very good as supplements to these four keys, but if the four keys are missing, these things aren't going to be able to paper over that. So you really need those four in place, and then these can kind of act as force multipliers on top of that. Along with injury risk reduction, a little bit on, or sorry, along with recovery, a little bit on injury risk reduction. So we've had a series of hamstring, calf, and adductor issues that we've been noticing. And so we have a few exercises that we like to prescribe to help um, try to counteract that. So the one up at the top is the Nordic hamstring curl. Basically, you start upright and then you lower yourself down eccentrically with your hamstrings. It's a really good way to strengthen and stress your hamstrings. And in the literature, it's shown to be pretty effective at reducing the risk of injury. It won't completely protect you, but it helps to reduce the likelihood of injury. Um, and then the bent knee press up doesn't look like a lot, but you're pushing up, pushing down through your heels, pushes your hips up a little bit, and creates a isometric contraction of your hamstrings in a shortened position. And then the straight leg glute bridge creates an isometric contraction of your hamstrings in a extended position. And so it helps to just target and provide a stimulus to your hamstrings in positions where it doesn't normally get them. And when it does, is are areas where we can see things go wrong. So providing a stimulus to the hamstring in that position just helps to reduce the likelihood that you have an injury. Then adductor, it's an area that does not get as much focus. So the adductor side plank, you are in plank position with your foot on the bench, and then you just maintain the side plank for anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds, and then rest a couple times each side. If leg all the way straight is too uncomfortable, you can also bend the knee and put the knee on the bench and reduce the size of the moment arm, making it feel a little bit easier. And then this one is a combo of adductor and hamstring. So basically it's an RDL, and then you're resisting the pull of the pulley with your adductor to try to prevent your body from twisting. So it's a nice combination for your adductor and your hamstring. Then the last two are for your calves. So you have eccentric calf raises. So you go up on two, down on one. And then just single leg weighted calf raises. We found that both of these can be really helpful to reducing the potential risk of a calf or plantar issues. Um, so that is all I have for you. Please, if you have any questions, send them to Leland, and I will be happy to answer them either in a written format or via video. Thank you guys so much.